Hello, and welcome to the I Was Raised in a Religious Cult Stories from the Other Side podcast. My name is Scar, and this podcast is going to be about my experiences. I was raised in a religious cult. More specifically, I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. The podcast is going to be about my experience growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, about my childhood and everything surrounding what it was like to be a Jehovah's Witness and how it affected me then and into adulthood. And it's also just going to be about my life in general. It's all sort of interconnected, if that makes sense. Now, my partner will also be joining me. Their name is Lost in Japan, or like their internet handle, and I call them Japan. They're here to help me with my memory issues and also to be here for moral support, so say hello.
Hello, I'm Japan.
I'm a little nervous if you can't tell.
I,
I was,
I, I don't tell at all. You just seem like you got it
I'm just
perfect.
like killing it right now. I keep
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
a
totally.
lot and I'm in my head about that, but
I haven't even heard it once. You're good.
you're cute. I will do my best. Like I said, I'm nervous. This is a lot of trauma and things like that to go through and talk about, so please bear with me for not being great at storytelling. I'll do my best. I figured I could start with a few basic things about me. I'm 28 years old. I am AFAB. For those that don't know what AFAB means, it means assigned female at birth, but I identify as they, them. I went undiagnosed for most of my life with autism, ADHD, and OCD. I'm now aware of those things and working on them. I was raised in basically the middle of nowhere, Arkansas, in the United States. I grew up in a very, very tiny town. Our population was 600 people. The town stretched about 6.5 miles in total. It was very small. Really, really small. I had two older brothers. I grew up with one of them, my brother Stone. We were closer in age. He was only 2 years older than me, and my mom and dad. I I'm nervous.
It's
I
okay to be nervous.
I
You're
appreciate
saying a
it.
lot. You're
There's a
good on
lot.
track. I was just letting you go, letting you cook. It's all good.
I'm cooking, yes. I still don't fully understand that one. I I wrote something about kind of how I felt. I don't know why, I just felt like it was something that I wanted to start with before we dove into everything, so I'm just going to read that now. I've often thought about how to describe my childhood, about what it felt like to grow up in that house and that religion. I'll never be able to actually express it fully. I didn't know I was being abused and that I was being raised in a cult. I thought the things I was experiencing were normal. I thought I had a loving, caring family. That's what I was being told. So when I felt lost or outcast, I believed those feelings were my fault, that something was wrong with me. That, on top of my autism, had me so constantly questioning everything about myself, and I never really questioned what was happening to me and if those things were something I was okay with. I thought I had a home, that I was home, that my family was good to me, but that was not the case. I was born into a world where the people and everything around me was on fire. I was told to swallow this fire. I was told that it was love, that the burning and anguish was so bad because I was just too sensitive. The religion, my parents, everyone around me failed me. I grew up in a world full of adults that never once had my well-being in mind. The ways I was failed and the ways it all affected me is what I'm going to be talking about in these podcast episodes. So let's start at the beginning. I think that would probably be the best place to start. My early life. So I gained sentience, I would say, around the age of 3, which I think is kind of young to have big memories. I could be wrong about that.
No, I think that's definitely true. Like, I don't think a lot of people remember that type of stuff. I don't think I do, other
Yeah,
than like
I
bits
was
and
young.
pieces. But
Yeah, I think it's because I think it's because trauma was already so heavily present in my life. The reason is my very best friend in the world, my grandpa, at the time moved into our home with us because he was dying of pancreatic cancer, which is extremely traumatizing when you're very small to watch. At that time, you don't really understand death. You don't understand that people are people. And, at that age, adults seem unflappable, like nothing could ever happen to them. And he was just kind of wilting away in our house. He got really skinny and he got very angry, which is totally understandable because he was in so much pain and he didn't feel good. He would be mean to me, which I don't really blame him for. I can't imagine how much he was struggling. And I think that's why I remember things kind of strongly around that time. And I think it was his death was the catalyst for us really getting heavily involved with Jehovah's Witnesses. Because my mom was sort of already involved. She was always touch and go with Jehovah's Witnesses her entire childhood. She had met other people that had studied the Bible with her. That's something that Jehovah's Witnesses do. They do Bible studies and try to bring you into the religion. I think that's probably most religions, but I don't really know. Or at least most Christian religions. I don't want to lump all of them in with Christians, but she always had some sort of connection to Jehovah's Witnesses, but she never fully got to pursue that growing up, even though she wanted to. This was something that had always appealed to my mom, which is actually really understandable because my mom was heavily abused growing up, and I believe that Jehovah's Witnesses really do prey, I guess, on people that are in bad situations or aren't doing well. That's sort of even what they taught us whenever they would teach us to go out in service, is to find people that it was our way of getting in with people, is finding them in really terrible situations in their life. They were like, oh, well, this is where they're going to be more open to learning about it, which is understandable. It's like losing someone. But my mom definitely had to somewhat be involved around this time already with Jehovah's Witnesses, because there is a picture my mom has of my grandpa playing the guitar with some Jehovah's Witnesses. So I don't think she was fully involved, but a little bit at this time. But after he died is when I think we really started to heavily lean into that. My grandpa died he died in 1998. He actually died on the night of, I believe it was the Leonids meteor shower, which my mom told me she thought the world was ending because her dad died. She actually thought it was Armageddon because as she was driving home from the hospital, the meteor shower had started, and I don't think she probably kept up with it, especially with her dad dying. And she's like, I'm pretty sure the world is ending. This is Armageddon. And Armageddon is basically the apocalypse for Jehovah's Witnesses. It's supposed to clean out all the evil. We'll get into that and how that affected me later. wasn't great. I'm just gonna say it, teaching little kids that God is going to destroy people, and even the good people might die during that apocalypse is not fun. It is very scary, and I even scared people around me with it, other kids around me. uh, like I said, we'll get to that at some point. So at this point, my grandpa had died, and I do remember the day of his funeral. I remember it in bits and pieces. I specifically remember a few things. I do remember my mom was very upset because after the funeral, there were hundreds, hundreds of people that went to my grandpa's funeral. I grew up in a small town. Everybody knows everybody. It was like had his funeral at this cemetery, which I've taken to Japan too. It's a cemetery out in the middle of nowhere down a gravel road. Doesn't have a lot of parking, so we had to walk a mile from where we parked just to get to the cemetery for it. And afterwards, hundreds of people showed up at our house, which was unprecedented. My mom wasn't planning for that. She doesn't really know why it happened, but we get home and there's just all these people at our house. And me being so young, it was really scary to kind of walk into a house full of people like that, especially because I wasn't with my parents. I've always remembered it as a sea of legs. I was very small, very short, and I was trying to find my parents in this sea of adult legs, and there were so many people in our house, and it was unreal. Everybody was in the living room, and it was not a good vibe. It was so scary. We grew up in a trailer, so trailers are not really meant for a ton of people to be in them. And I know that Jehovah's Witnesses were there, and that was a very big focal point for my mom, even though she was in mourning, because the Jehovah's Witnesses that we were around, that we were sort of involved with, were Jehovah's Witnesses that were very, very rich, and they were kind of like pillars of the community money-wise. They were small town rich, like the kind of rich they're very hoity-toity, very rude, they run the town, really not nice people. And my mom was like, the house isn't cleaned, which, to be fair, whose house is going to be clean around the time that their parent dies? That's a really hard thing to have happen. And my mom was just
That's
totally
really valid.
yeah, my mom was totally freaked out about that. She was like, the house isn't clean and there's all these people, but especially these Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're gonna think we're dirty. I hate that was my mom's focal point that day. That's so crappy. I mean, that's genuinely red flag number one. If you're more concerned about the cleanliness of your house than because of Jehovah's Witnesses, then the thing that is traumatizing and horrible that you're dealing with. But I remember,
Exactly.
yeah, I remember my specific memories of that day is trying to climb through, or make my way through the sea of legs, adult legs, and to get to my room. At the time, I shared it with my brother Stone, and I got in there, and he was already in there. I remember we were just very scared because we didn't know where our parents were, and there were all these strangers, these strange people. We didn't quite understand that our grandpa was dead, and I remember we actually ended up sitting on my bed together, and we started crying together, and that's mostly what I remember from that day. I have a small thing that I've remembered my whole life where I don't really know what the situation was, but the area to my brother and I's room was kind of blocked off from everybody, like, hey, don't go back there. And there was a man that I had never met that had kind of snuck back there and made me extremely uncomfortable and scared me. I do remember that. I don't like that memory. But
Don't blame me on
thankfully,
that.
yeah, it was really scary. I don't know what that guy wanted to do with me, but I was terrified. So I got to my brother, and that's all I remember from that day. Now, after, My mom got more involved with Jehovah's Witnesses, and my mom was also very, very depressed. At this time, I was still 3, almost 4, and my brother was 5, almost 6. And my mom would just disappear for like hours out into the shed. She was reading like magazines and stuff. I think she was super depressed and she had gone to get medicine for that, and it made her just not, it was not good for her. And she would just disappear for hours and leave me and my brother alone in the house. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, my mom shouldn't have had to do that alone. My dad was at work. That's a whole thing. We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
It's a whole different can of worms. Right?
That is a totally, oh my gosh. We'll get to that. But yeah, that was a really bad time. I do remember my mother's grief and how I took it on very heavily. And I do think there is something to be said about how mother-daughter relationships are. Also, I do want to clarify, I do identify as they, them, but I was raised a girl, and I might refer to myself in terms of daughter and things like that, because although I identify as they, them, I was raised a girl and as a daughter. So when I say that, I don't want people to think, or it's okay to misgender me, I guess. So mother-daughter relationships, I feel like, are just so complicated, especially mine. Another thing we'll get into. No one is prepared for that. I'm not even prepared for that, to be fair. But my mom, I would catch her crying. And I hated that when I did, she was very shut down. One of the times I caught her crying, I was like, it's gonna be okay, mommy. And she didn't react. And that was my first touch with what the rest of my life was going to be like as a daughter, is me trying to fix things for my mom. I was her emotional support from the get-go. And although that was never my job, it was a job that I was forced to have. So any time my mom was sad or upset, I was the person she would go to for that, which, more stuff to get into. But anyway, I do remember when we started studying with Jehovah's Witnesses. It was this couple from the local Kingdom Hall that started studying with my parents, and they would do the house calls. So Jehovah's Witnesses go out in service, and if there's someone that reacted positively to you leaving them with a magazine, or you had a positive conversation, you would view them as a return call. So you would go back to them, usually like within a week or a month. It depended on the different territories and if you were in that territory, because they would take maps, section them off, and you would get what was called territories, and you would go to that specific area and talk to people about, Jehovah's Witnesses, religion, whatever. I don't know how they do it now. I feel like it's probably changed, especially since COVID. I'm not up to date with any of it, but this is how it was back when I was growing up and when I was a Jehovah's Witness. And so they would come to our parents' house a lot, and I remember those times when they would come, and usually it was during the day when my dad was at work and my brother and I were home with my mom. And my mom, I have a few very specific memories of when they had come to the house. One of them was when my mom and I were baking biscuits. I think it was earlier in the morning. We were making breakfast together, and we were making biscuits, and my mom went to the door because they had come to the door, and she was talking to them, and I was watching the biscuits, and it got to a point where the biscuits needed to be pulled out of the oven, And my mom, I kept trying to get her attention and she kept telling me, "You're being rude." So I go back to the kitchen and I get them out myself, and I'm capable of doing that. And I put them on top of the oven, and after I do that, I reach in, and the lip of the pan burns my arm. It actually like burned the Nike symbol into my arm. It
Or
was,
sponsorship.
I know,
Whichever it is.
I need well, it's not there anymore. It got better, but what ended up growing there were a ton of warts. It was so weird. I don't know if burns can cause warts or if that was just a weird coincidence, or I don't know what warts are exactly, but they're gross and I hate them and I had them very bad. But I burned my arm super bad. I was in so much pain. I was wanting to scream. At this point, this was the most physical pain I had ever been in. And I'm crying. Like, it was so painful. And so I go to the door trying to get my mom's attention. Like, to me, this was in the moment an emergency, which looking back and how bad the burn was, it probably was more of an emergency, which my mom didn't handle medical stuff well. She usually treated it at home. Not
The
probably.
worst.
It was so bad. Oh my gosh. So many stories of that. Later time. And I remember her being so mean to me. She was telling me I was being rude and I needed to go, either be quiet and listen or leave. And I'm just like crying and burning. So my first associations with Jehovah's Witnesses weren't the best, because why was her attention towards them more important than my immediate need? I was always a weirdly understanding child. I was very, unfortunately, mature for my age, which a lot of that is trauma. I think sometimes autistic children have that experience as well, where they have to be more mature. It also can go the other way, but I was way more mature than I had to be, and I normally understood not to be rude and interrupt, so it was upsetting that my mom thought the worst of me in that moment. But I think that's about when we really started to pick up the pace of being Jehovah's Witnesses. We started attending meetings, and at that time, back in the day, it was 3 meetings a week. 3 meetings is a lot.
That's absolutely insane.
Right? It was Tuesday night, Thursday night, and then Sunday morning. And the meetings would go until like 10 o'clock at night. I believe that was like the Thursday night meeting. The Tuesday night meeting was much smaller, but it was so hard to be so young and juggling school, and then going out in service on the weekends, and then meetings. It was exhausting, and we'd have to go to bed like pretty much immediately when we got home, which is a very hard transition, and transitions are something that's very hard for neurodivergent people, which, for those that don't know, neurodivergent generally is like autism, ADHD, OCD, etc. A lot of things can fall under that umbrella, but those are some examples, at least my personal examples. And for neurodivergent people, transitions are very, very difficult. So going home and trying to go to sleep was hard, and then I already had sleep issues, which were so exhausting. I think honestly what set that off, at least some of them, was my grandpa dying of cancer, because I would just like lay awake for hours thinking of that I had cancer and I was dying. So that was fun. I really had a hard time of things, especially because my parents didn't get me diagnosed, even though my mom has admitted to me as an adult that she knew something was different and wasn't right, and that she has often wondered if she herself had autism, which I do believe, because it can be genetic, and my mom also has a lot of the same criteria for autism. So yeah, things are just kind of a hot mess at my house, and I might be hard on my mom when we're talking about things. I do want to say I have a lot of compassion for my mom and the things that she went through, but I have gotten to a point where I no longer have much compassion for her because of the things
Which is
that.
valid.
What?
It's valid, you know.
She's done some very truly heinous things, which Japan's like, I have no compassion for your mom, which
None at all.
very understandable. She's terrible. We'll get to those things. But yeah, that's kind of how we started to become Jehovah's Witnesses. Like I said, the catalyst was really my grandpa's death, and that is what really catapulted us into becoming Jehovah's Witnesses, which my dad never really wanted to be a Jehovah's Witness. My mom sort of dragged him into it, and like I mentioned earlier, I don't really know the full details of what being a Jehovah's Witness looks like today, but at that time, if your partner wasn't a Jehovah's Witness with you, it was actually extremely hard to be a Jehovah's Witness, and I don't think my mom would have had that. You know, she wouldn't have been let him not be one. My dad never really fully subscribed to it. I don't think he definitely led a double life. I mean, years later, after everything went down, my mom found a secret address that he had, which might also explain some other things. So much to get to, but we have the time. We're going slow with this so that I can explain everything as well as I can and as much as my memory allows me to. But yeah, my dad grew up Catholic, non-practicing, but that's sort of what he grew up around, mainly practicing when he lived with his grandmother. But my dad I don't think my dad's ever actually been super religious. I think it's always just been something my dad participated in when the people around him did, or if it made him look like a good guy, or it gave him brownie points for his charisma. My dad's a narcissist, so my dad would do or say anything that would make other people happy, except his own family. But I think that's around where we'll leave it. That's just kind of the start of where us becoming a Jehovah's Witnesses started, and next time I'll try to get more into the next steps of that and school and how it affected me there. Things are a little hazy and my timelines may not be entirely perfect because my memory, like I said, is very shot. Trauma has played a very large role in that, and it's very hard for me to quite exactly remember what things happened where. So if my timelines seem a little funky, I'm doing the best I can. I'm being as accurate as I possibly can because I remember in kindergarten not being super, like, we were really heavily getting into it, but I don't remember what age you are in kindergarten. But my parents got baptized in 2001.
5, 6?
Well, I guess that would make sense then, because in first grade is when I was told we weren't allowed to do the Pledge of Allegiance anymore. But we'll get into kind of the school aspect of things and how that affected my existence and how that played a part in the cult and how those things really butted heads and caused me a lot of issues and heartache. We'll get into all of that and how living in the place that I did not help things. So I think, yeah. Do you have anything you wanted to add, Japan?
No, I just listening and trying to help out. But that one was, I think, pretty solid for you to remember everything for, so.
I appreciate it. I felt like I had a clear idea of where I was going with that, just like the opening episode. I hope that this was interesting for you guys. I hope that
Definitely was.
if you're someone that is an ex-Jehovah's Witness or someone that maybe struggled with growing up in a cult or have any experience with this type of stuff, I hope it helps, and I hope that you feel less alone, especially if you're an XJW, because you get excommunicated. And I really hope that anyone listening to this that might be struggling with those things, I hope you're taking care. And I hope that things are good for you. And I hope that you find your people outside of the cult. And anyone that doesn't have experience in this but is interested in it, I ask that you are kind and respectful. I know it's interesting to learn about other people's experiences, but it is my life and it is very real, and the people in it are very real, and we all have feelings and we've all been heavily affected by this. And if you think you know me, you don't. Please, thank you. My
Very valid.
anonymity is very important to me. I just want the rest of my life to be as peaceful as possible. So, anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you, Japan, for joining me. I appreciate you. Make sure, if you guys would like, I know this is not my normal content, and it's definitely not Japan's content either. We usually do gaming and stuff like that. I'm kind of a giant goofball outside of this, which will probably come out because I laugh in the face of my trauma. I'm trying to be serious, but if you guys want, give him a follow, check out his channel. Like I said, I know it's not the normal stuff, but he is really fun. He's pretty cool. I mean, he's alright. I
Lies and
like him.
slander. I'm suing.
Anyway, thank you guys for listening, and I will catch you next time. Take care.
Bye.